Welcome to Learn with Roblox. In today's video, we're going to cover synthetic division. Our first problem says we have 4x cubed minus 6x squared minus 3x plus 6 divided by x minus 5, and we need to evaluate this using synthetic division. So the first thing I want you to know about synthetic division is if the denominator is in the form of x plus or minus some number, maybe c, then you're allowed to do synthetic division. However, if the denominator was something like x squared minus 4 or 2x plus 7 or minus x plus 8, we couldn't do synthetic division because they're not in the form of x plus or minus a number. But here, we have x minus 5, and that's in the correct form for synthetic division, so we're allowed to proceed. So how do you do synthetic division? First step is you take the number in the denominator, this minus 5, and you have to change it to a plus 5. Now we need to set up the table. So I'm going to write that 5 on the outside of the synthetic division table. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to write the coefficients of all the terms in the numerator from left to right in order of the highest power to the lowest power. So the highest power term is this x cubed. Its coefficient is 4. Then you have minus 6 on the x squared. Then you have minus 3 on the x. And then you have the plus 6. And now we're ready to do synthetic division. First thing you do is you take the 4 on the left side of this table and you drop it all the way down. You don't do anything with it. Next, I want you to remember the phrase multiply and add. So first, you multiply this 5 with the 4 down here. 5 times 4 gives you a 20. And what you need to do is you need to add these numbers, minus 6 and plus 20. So if you do minus 6 plus 20, you'll get positive 14. Now you just repeat multiplying and adding. So do 5 times 14. That's going to be 70. Now you add these up. Minus 3 plus 70 is 67. Now you multiply and add again. So 5 times 67 is 335. And then now you add one last time. So 6 plus 335 is 341. And now we have these numbers, 4, 14, 67, and 341. Okay, what does this tell us? How can this tell us the result of the division at the top? Well, this actually is the coefficients. These are the coefficients of our answer. So what does this mean? Well, notice how the highest degree term in our numerator was x cubed. What you have to do is you have to go from x cubed down to x squared. And that's where we start. So now this 4 right over here corresponds to the coefficient on x squared. And then you just keep going down. From x squared, you go down to x. So this means 14 is the coefficient on x. And then from x, you just go to the constant number that you add. So 67 just means plus 67. And in this 341, this is our remainder because it was the final number of our synthetic division. So I'm going to have plus 341, and because it's a remainder, we have to divide it by the divisor at the start. The divisor is just the numerator, which was x minus 5. So now let me just go down and make this more clear. So we have 4x squared plus 14x plus 67 plus 341, which is a remainder, divided by x minus 5. And just like that, we have computed the problem, or we've computed the division in the problem by doing synthetic division. And the final thing I want to point out is that because our remainder was not 0, it was 341, we can say that x minus 5 is not a factor of 4x cubed minus 6x squared minus 3x plus 6. In this problem, we have 2x to the 4th power plus 3x squared minus 10x plus 20 divided by x plus 3, and we need to use synthetic division to quickly evaluate this. So notice that the denominator is in the form of x plus or minus a number because it's x plus 3. And because it's in the correct form for synthetic division, we can proceed. So the first step of synthetic division is you take the number in the denominator. Here is plus 3, and you have to change that to a minus 3 for the sake of synthetic division. So you always flip the sign of the number in the denominator. If it was a minus 3, you make it a plus 3, but here's plus 3, so make it minus 3. And then set up the synthetic division table. So this is the way I set it up, but you can set it up any way that you wish. It doesn't matter too much. So now we need to fill in the coefficients of the numerator into the synthetic division table. So start with the highest degree term. That's the 2x to the 4th power. Its coefficient is 2. And then now be very careful. You might be tempted to just put a 3 here and then a minus 10 and then a plus 20 and then call it a day. But you need to watch out for something. After x to the fourth, the next term whose coefficient you need to put down is the coefficient on x to the third. But I don't see x to the third in this problem. So in reality, what's going on is that the coefficient on x to the third power is 0. It's hidden. So because of that, we need to put in a 0 for the x to the third coefficient. And then now you can proceed with the rest of the problem. So then we have a plus 3 from the x squared, then a minus 10 from the x, and then a plus 20. And then now we're ready to proceed with synthetic division. First step is you always bring down the first number inside of the table no matter what. So bring down that 2. Now multiply and add. Minus 3 times 2 is minus 6. Now you add 0 and minus 6. 0 plus minus 6 is minus 6. Now you do 3 times minus 6. If you do 3 times minus 6, or minus 3 times minus 6, you're going to get positive 18. Now do 3 plus 18. 3 plus 18 gets you 21. Now do minus 3 times 21, that's negative 63. And then minus 10 plus minus 63 is minus 73. And then finally do minus 3 times minus 73, that ends up being positive 219. And then do 20 plus 219. That is 239. And now we have all the coefficients in our answer. So how's this going to work? Well, in the numerator, the highest coefficient was x to the fourth power. Therefore, you go from x to the fourth power minus x to the, or you go from x to the fourth power to x to the third in the answer. So this 2 is the coefficient on x to the third power. And you just keep going down. Minus 6 is the coefficient on x to the second power. 21 is the coefficient on x. Minus 73 is just the number. And then 239 is our remainder. So you can write this as 239 divided by our divisor at the start, which is that x plus 3 denominator. So now let me just go down and make this more obvious what the answer is. So in essence, our answer is 2x to the third power minus 6x squared minus or plus 21x minus 73 plus 239 divided by x plus 3. So after synthetic division, this is our answer. And because 239 is our remainder, and that's not 0, we can say that x plus 3 is not a factor of 2x to the fourth power plus 3x squared minus 10x plus 20. Let's go to the next one. In this problem, we have x to the third minus x squared minus 17x plus 20 divided by x minus 4. And we need to use synthetic division to quickly evaluate this. The first thing I want to point out is that because we have the denominator being in the form of x plus or minus a number, this is a suitable problem for synthetic division. And then now let's proceed with synthetic division. The first step is you take the number in the denominator and you change its sign. So that minus 4 becomes a plus 4 for the sake of synthetic division. Then now let's set up the synthetic division table. As always, you probably might see different ways of setting up this table in your classroom or other videos, but you can set it up however you wish. This is just the way I set it up. You do not have to set it up like this at all. But what you want to do is you want to put the 4 on the outside of this table, and then fill in the coefficients on the term of the numerator from left to right. So x cubed has a hidden coefficient of 1. So I'm going to put a 1 here. That minus x squared has a coefficient of minus 1. Minus 17x has a coefficient of minus 17. And then plus 20 is just plus 20. And then now you proceed with synthetic division. So first step is you always drop down the first number inside the table. So drop down the 1. And then now you multiply and add. So do 4 times 1. 4 times 1 is just going to be 4. Now do minus 1 plus 4. You add these numbers. So minus 1 plus 4 is positive 3. Now do 4 times 3. 4 times 3 is just 12. Now do minus 17 plus 12. If you do that, you should get minus 5. And then finally multiply 4 and minus 5. That's going to be negative 20. And 20 minus 20 is just 0. And now we're done with synthetic division. We know what the coefficients are in the answer. So because in this problem, we started with the highest degree being x cubed. In our answer, we're going to start with x squared, the next highest coefficient. So what this means is that 1 is the coefficient on x squared, and you just keep going down. 3 is therefore the coefficient on x, and then minus 5 is just minus 5, because after x, you just have the constant number. And then 0 is a remainder. So this is like saying we have plus 0 divided by x minus 4, which was the divisor at the start. So let me just go down and summarize this. Therefore, our answer to this problem is x squared, because you have 1 times x squared, plus 3x minus 5. And then this 0x plus 4, 0 divided by x minus 4, well, that's just 0. So I'm not going to add that. And this is it. This is the answer to our problem. So if you do x cubed minus x squared minus 17x plus 20 divided by x minus 4, you will get the answer of x squared plus 3x minus 5. And I want to point out something. Notice that our remainder is 0. Because our remainder is 0, we can say that x minus 4 is a factor of x cubed minus x squared minus 17x plus 20. So whenever you get a remainder of 0 in synthetic division, you can say that the divisor is a factor of the numerator. In this problem, we have minus 3x to the fourth power plus 6x cubed minus 2x squared plus 4x divided by x minus 2, and we need to do synthetic division on this problem. So the first thing to point out is that because we have something in the form of x plus or minus number, we're allowed to do synthetic division on this. Now the next step in synthetic division is you take the number in the denominator, that minus 2, and you flip it to a plus 2 for the sake of the synthetic division table. So let's set up that table now. I'm going to have a 2 on the outside. And then you want to write the coefficients of all the terms in the numerator from left to right, from the highest power to the lowest power. So the highest power is x to the fourth power. Its coefficient is minus 3. Then we have plus 6 on the x cubed. And we have minus 2 on the x squared. And you have plus 4 on the x. And then be careful, we're not done yet. There's also a plus 0 here, so be very careful. Even the constant term needs to be added into the synthetic division table. So I'm going to have to add a 0 here. Then now we're ready to proceed with synthetic division. So let's do it. First thing you do is you always drop down the leftmost number inside that table. So the minus 3, we drop that down and leave it there. Then now you multiply and add. 2 times minus 3 is minus 6. Now do minus 6. Now you add these numbers. 6 plus minus 6 will get you 0. Now you multiply 2 and 0. 2 times 0 is just 0. Now do minus 2 plus 0. That's just going to be minus 2. Now do minus 2 times positive 2. That'll just get you negative 4. And then do 4 plus negative 4. That will get you 0. Now do 2 times 0. 2 times 0 is just 0. Then 0 plus 0 is just obviously 0. So now we have all the coefficients in our answer. So notice how the highest power in the numerator was x to the fourth power. Therefore, in our answer, the highest power is going to be x cubed. So we start with x cubed. So this minus 3 is the coefficient on x cubed. The 0 is the coefficient on the next highest degree, which is x squared. And you just keep going on like this. Therefore, minus 2 is the coefficient on x. 0 is just plus 0. And our remainder is 0 because that was the final number in synthetic division. So this is like saying 0 divided by x minus 2 because you take the remainder and you divide it by the denominator in the problem. And then let me just go down and make this more clear. So therefore, our answer is minus 3x cubed plus 0x squared minus 2x plus 0 divided by x minus 2. Now, there's a lot of zeros in this problem, so let's just clean this up. So we have minus 3x cubed minus 2x. And that is the answer if you do minus 3x to the fourth power plus 6x cubed minus 2x squared plus 4x divided by x minus 2. And then I want to point out that because the remainder is 0, we can say that x minus 2 is indeed a factor of minus 3x to the fourth power plus 6x cubed minus 2x squared plus 4x. Let's go to the next one. In this problem, we have 4x cubed minus 2x squared minus x plus 5 divided by 5 minus x, and we need to do synthetic division. However, you might see a problem. So in synthetic division, the divisor or the denominator has to be in the form of x plus or minus a number. However, in this problem, we have 5 minus x. So that's not in the form we need. So what are we going to do? Are we just going to give up? Well, Learn with Roblox doesn't give up. what I'm going to do is this. Let's multiply the numerator and the denominator by -1. This doesn't change the equation in the answer. It'll be the same thing because -1 divided by -1 is just 1. And when you multiply a fraction by 1, you don't change it at all. So I'm allowed to do this. But once we do this, I think you'll notice something. So let me just quickly write the result of this. So when you multiply by -1, you're just flipping the signs of everything. So that 4x cubed will become a -4x cubed. And then just keep going down. We have plus 2x squared plus x minus 5. And then divided by that 5 becomes a -5, and the minus x becomes a plus x. And then I can just rewrite -5 plus x. That's the same thing as x minus 5. I just swap those two terms around. And then now notice something. We can do synthetic division with this. It's in the form of x plus or minus a number. So now we're good to go. So what I'm going to do is do synthetic division with this form of the equation right here. Or this form of the fraction rather, because technically this isn't an equation, but that's for another day. So let's do synthetic division on this yellow box here. I want a new color. I'm going to choose a green. So first up with synthetic division, you take the denominator, you take the number in there, and you flip its sign. So that -5 is going to become a +5 when you do synthetic division. Then you set up the synthetic division table. And then you write down the coefficients of all the terms in the numerator from left to right. So you have -4, 2, 1, and -5. And then now let's proceed with synthetic division. First step is you carry down the -4 because you always carry down the leftmost term inside the synthetic division table. And then do multiplication and addition. 5 times -4 is -20. 2 plus -20 is -18. 5 times -18 is -90. And then 1 plus -90 is -89. And then 5 times -89 is -445. And then -5 times -445 is -450. Now these are the coefficients of our answer. What do I mean by that? Well, in the numerator of the initial fraction, the highest power was x cubed. But then in the answer, the highest power is going to be x squared then. So you start with x squared. So what I mean by this is that -4 is the coefficient on x squared, -18 is the coefficient on x, -89 is just -89 because you keep going down from x to the constant, and the -450 is our remainder. So I can write that as -450 divided by x minus 5, since that was the denominator in our newer form of the fraction. And then now let me just rewrite all this to make it clear. Or let me go down. So our answer to the problem is -4x squared, because I just put these together. Then we have -18x. Then I have -89. And then I have -450 divided by x minus 5. And that is the answer to our problem. So if you do 4x cubed minus 2x squared minus x plus 5 divided by 5 minus x, the answer you're going to get is -4x squared minus 18x minus 89 minus 450 divided by x minus 5. I think that was my 10th take on this problem, so I'm finally done. In this problem, we have 8x to the 5th power minus 4x cubed plus 10x plus 1866 divided by 2x plus 6. And we have to do synthetic division on this. Well, first off, this seems impossible because, once again, for synthetic division, you need the denominator to be in the form of x plus or minus a number. So this is 2x plus 6, not x plus 6. So what in the world can I do? Well, as always, Learn with Roblox does not give up. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2. And this should make it such that we can do synthetic division. So what happens if I do that? Well, if we divide the numerator by 2, all we're doing is just dividing the coefficients by 2. So let's do that. 8x to the 5th power therefore becomes 4x to the 5th power. Minus 4x cubed becomes minus 2x cubed. Plus 10x becomes plus 5x. And then 1866 divided by 2, you might need a calculator for this one, but it ends up being 933. And then if you divide the denominator by 2, well, 2x divided by 2 is just x, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So you have x plus 3, and notice that we can do synthetic division on this problem now. This is in a form that we can do synthetic division on. So now let's do synthetic division on this new version of the fraction. And let me get a new pen color. And sorry, I'm too far away to enclose this box, so just ignore that. So I'm gonna do the rest of the problem in green. So let's do synthetic division on this guy over here. So to do that, you first take the number in the denominator and you flip its sign. So plus 3 becomes a minus 3 for the sake of synthetic division. Now I'm gonna set the synthetic division to the left over here. So they have minus 3 outside. And then you have to write the coefficients of all the terms from left to right, from highest degree to lowest degree. So first we have a 4 on the x to the 5th power. Now be very careful here. You might just want to write the 2 and then the 5 and the 933. And if you do that, you're going to get the wrong answer. So what you need to realize is that notice how there's no x to the 4th power in the numerator. So therefore it's like a hidden plus 0 to the x to the 4th power. So this hidden 0 is something you must include. And then I can keep going. So you have minus 2. And then notice how there's no x squared term in the numerator as well. So it's like a hidden plus 0x squared. So I have to add that as well. And then now we have 5. And then we have 933. And now let's proceed carefully with synthetic division. So first you drop down the 4. And then do minus 3 times 4. That ends up being minus 12. Now do 0 plus negative 12. That's negative 12. Now do 3 or negative 3 times negative 12. That is positive 36. And then minus 2 plus 36 ends up being 34. Now do 34 times minus 3. You will end up with negative 102. Now do 0 plus negative 102. That ends up being negative 102. Now do minus 3 times negative 102. That's positive 306. Now do 306 plus 5, that's 311. And then do minus 3 times 311, that's equal to negative 933. And then plus 933 minus 933 will get you 0 as the remainder. So now we have all the coefficients in our answer. So because in the numerator, our highest power was x to the 5th power, the answer is going to start with x to the 4th power, and then you're going to keep going down. So in other words, 4 is the coefficient on x to the 4th power. 12 is the coefficient on x cubed. Or negative 12 is the coefficient on x cubed. 34 is the coefficient on x squared. Minus 1 and 2 is the coefficient on x. And then this isn't a coefficient on anything, it's just 311. And then 0 is just the remainder. So it's just 0 divided by x plus 3. So now let me just rewrite all this and make it clear. So therefore, the answer to our problem is the following. We're going to have 4x to the 4th power minus 12x to the 3rd power plus 34x squared minus 102x plus 311. And then the remainder is 0, so I'm just going to ignore it. And that's it. That's the answer to this big guy up here. I can't fully circle it because I'm too far from it. But that's it. That's what happens if you do synthetic division on this problem. You first have to turn it into this form, and then when you do synthetic division over here, you're going to get this answer. Man, that was an absolute doozy, and I can't believe I did that on my first attempt. Okay, sorry to mention this, but I forgot to say that because our remainder was equal to 0 in this problem, let me write that down. Because we had a remainder of 0 in this problem, we can say that 2x minus 6 is a factor of 8x to the 5th power minus 4x to the 3rd power plus 10x plus 1866. In this problem, we have 4x to the 8th power minus 5 divided by x plus 1, and we need to do synthetic division to evaluate this. Come on, you guys, how bad could this be? Well, let's see. So first step in synthetic division, you take the number in the denominator and you flip it. So this plus 1 will become a minus 1 for the sake of synthetic division. Next, you set up the synthetic division table. And it's going to be quite long, as you'll see why very shortly. So what you do is you first take the minus 1 and you put it on the outside. Then the next thing you do is you write the coefficients in the numerator from left to right. So the first coefficient is 4 on x to the 8th power. However, I need to notice something. There is no x to the 7th, there's no x to the 6th, no x to the 5th, x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, x to the 2nd, or x terms in the numerator. In other words, these all have a coefficient of 0 in the numerator, and I have to account for all this. So that means I'm going to put down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 zeros in this table. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you can add the minus 5. So that's why I had to make this table so big. But now we're ready to proceed with synthetic division. I'm just going to erase all this nonsense up here. So let's do synthetic division. First step is you drop down the first 4. And then now you do minus 1 times 4. That's negative 4. Now add 0 and negative 4. That's negative 4. Minus 4 times minus 1 is positive 4. Now do 0 plus 4. That's just going to be 4. Now do minus 1 times 4. That's negative 4. And I think you're starting to see a pattern here. So 0 plus negative 4 is going to be negative 4. And we're just going to alternate plus 4 and minus 4. So minus 1 times minus 4 becomes plus 4. And then this will be a 4, which turns into minus 4, which stays as a minus 4, which becomes a plus 4, stays as 4, turns into a minus 4, minus 4. And then we'll finally have a plus 4 here because minus 4 times minus 1 is plus 4. And then minus 5 plus 4 is just 1. And then now let me go down a bit. So we have all the coefficients in the answer. So this problem started with x to the 8th power. Therefore, the answer will start with a power less than that, x to the 7th power. So this means that this 4 over here is the coefficient on x to the 7th. This minus 4 is the coefficient on x to the 6th. Then you have x to the 5th. This is the coefficient on x to the 4th. This is the coefficient on x to the 3rd. This is the coefficient on x squared. This is the coefficient on x. And this is just minus 4. And this 1, sorry, I made a mistake. This should be a minus 1 actually. This minus 1 is the remainder. So minus 1 divided by x plus 1, since that was the denominator in the initial problem. So now let me just rewrite all of this as one big expression. So basically we're going to have 4x to the 7th power minus 4x to the 6th power plus 4x to the 5th power minus 4x to the 4th power plus 4x to the 3rd power minus 4x to the 2nd power plus 4x minus 4 minus 1 divided by x plus 1. So that is a massive problem, and we're all done with it. And because we got a remainder of minus 1, and that remainder is not equal to 0, we can say that x plus 1 is not a factor of 4x to the 8th power minus 5. I'm proud to say that this problem only took me 2 attempts. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.